She was born to conquer, yet she chose to bow her head. If you were the most powerful alien princess in the galaxy, what if anything could be worth giving it all up? They say love can change anyone, but how could a lowly creature like a human make someone who never knew defeat willing to sell off her entire empire? The sky over Earth, usually clear and blue, shifted into a strange shade of pale violet. That morning, clouds tore apart like fabric ripped by invisible hands. Across the major cities, people looked up, shielding their eyes, mouths hanging open in horror, as the invasion fleet from Gravia broke through the heavens like a living prophecy. 7 warships, their metallic wings razor-thin, sliced through the atmosphere, leaving behind crimson-violet trails like blood dripping from an unseen wound. They moved in perfect arrow formation, and at the very tip flew the royal flagship, its insignia burning brighter than all the others. At the helm of that ship was Princess Valeria, sole heir to the Gravia Empire. Behind the translucent battle mask, her face was cold and expressionless. Her amethyst-colored eyes scanned the tiny Earth cities below with open disdain. Her platinum hair was braided tightly behind her, and on her forehead glowed the royal mark, 3 purple dots arranged in an inverted triangle. "Your Highness, we have initiated atmospheric entry over target sector Tronsung 3, her deputy reported using the Empire's code name for Earth. Valeria didn't answer immediately. She slid a gloved hand across the console, bringing up data streams, the locations of Earth's major cities, every strategic weakness painstakingly mapped over the past 5 years. Begin Phase 1. She ordered at last, her voice cold enough to freeze steel. Prioritize military command centers, then take out their telecommunications grid. I want this planet paralyzed within 3 hours. Valeria was no stranger to war. At just 9 years old, she'd been part of planetary invasions under the watchful eye of the Emperor, her father, but today was different. Today she was in command. This was her final trial before officially ascending as the Empire's next ruler. "Your Highness, should we issue a diplomatic message first?" one of her advisors asked, voice trembling. "Our research suggests that humans might be... We didn't come here to negotiate." Valeria cut him off sharply, her violet eyes flashing with menace. "We came to conquer. Humans are classified as a low-tier species by imperial standards. Negotiations are for equals." She reached up, adjusting the small, black metal crown atop her head, the symbol of absolute authority. For 23 years, that crown had never left her, and she had sworn it never would. The fleet pressed in, diving lower through the cloud cover. Earth's defenses, once a source of human pride, looked almost laughable to the Gravian forces. A few desperate missiles launched upward, only to be effortlessly absorbed by the ship's energy shields. "Pathetic," Valeria muttered. "They really believe those tiny arrows could touch us." The ships split off, each targeting different key locations except Valeria's flagship, which maintained its course straight for Washington, D.C., the so-called heart of humanity's greatest superpower. That's when her console started flashing red. "Report," she barked, frowning at the rapidly changing numbers on her screen. "Your Highness, we're detecting unexpected magnetic disturbances." Her chief engineer cried out. "There are anomalies in this planet's atmosphere that weren't accounted for in previous scans." Valeria gripped the controls tighter. "Stabilize the systems. This is a primitive world. Nothing here can stop us." But almost as if the universe itself sought to humble her arrogance, a massive geomagnetic storm erupted directly ahead. Blue-green lightning twisted and writhed like monstrous electric serpents, tearing open the skies and lashing out at the fleet without warning. "Break formation, evade the storm," Valeria commanded. But it was too late. Her ship took a direct hit. The shielding systems overloaded instantly. Alarms blared through the cockpit as Valeria struggled to steady the controls, feeling the ship shudder violently before spinning out of control. "Status report," she shouted desperately, wrestling with the joystick. "All systems failing. Your Highness, we're in free fall." For the first time in her life, Princess Valeria of Gravia felt fear, not of death, but of failure, something she had never known before. "Activate my escape pod," she ordered, her voice still eerily calm. "Stabilize the ship if you can. I'll re-establish contact once I'm on the ground." The pod launched from the crashing flagship, hurtling into the atmosphere below. Through the small window, Valeria watched her once flawless fleet scatter each ship, battling the savage magnetic storm. She clenched her fists. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. Today was meant to mark her conquest of Earth, not her downfall at the hands of random cosmic chaos. The escape pod plunged through the storm clouds, spiraling towards some unknown wilderness below. Valeria tried activating the navigation system, but it was dead. She had no idea where she would land. "Disgraceful," she muttered under her breath. "I swear I will burn this entire planet to ashes when I return." But even as the pod fell, destiny was already shifting beneath her. And Valeria had no way of knowing that her greatest defeat was about to become the doorway to something she had never imagined. From the heavens, her pod looked like a tiny shooting star, streaking down toward a vast, untamed wilderness. And no one, not even Valeria herself, could have predicted what was waiting for her on the surface. To understand Valeria, you first have to understand the Gravia Empire, a civilization that had already thrived for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. The Gravians weren't just another alien race. They were the product of accelerated evolution under the light of 3 twin suns. Their bodies contained a rare enzyme that allowed them to convert electromagnetic energy into raw physical power, giving them lifespans 4 times longer than Earth's and strength far beyond human limits. But this gift also shaped a culture obsessed with genetic supremacy. The Gravia Empire does not conquer, went the first lesson every Gravian child learned in the cradle. We simply restore the natural order of the universe. Their hierarchy was ruthless and complex. Every species in the galaxy was ranked on a biological scale, and humans unfortunately scored a mere 12 out of 100. A number so low they were classified on par with high-grade livestock on other worlds. Valeria grew up in the Crystal Spire, a colossal tower that pierced the sky made of living crystal that could grow and heal itself. She never knew her mother. In the Gravian royal court, mothers were seen only as noble vessels, important only for carrying royal blood. After giving birth, they were removed from the palace, never to be spoken of again. Her father, Emperor Thalaron, was a man of unimaginable cruelty. He personally oversaw her training from the time she was 3 years old. Every morning, Valeria was forced to recite the names of planets the Empire had conquered. Every afternoon, she was made to witness public executions of traitors. And every night, she endured combat training so brutal that even seasoned warriors would have collapsed. "You want to cry," the Emperor would sneer whenever she stumbled. From exhaustion, "Tears are a luxury the gods deny themselves, and you, Valeria, were born to become a god." On her 8th birthday, Valeria was given command of a strike team sent to eliminate a rebel village on a recently conquered world. It was the first time she killed. She didn't even blink. Even when a local child clung to her leg, begging for mercy, she gave the order without hesitation. That night, back at the Crystal Spire, Emperor Thalaron did something rare. He smiled. He placed a small black metal crown upon her head, the mark of the heir. "You have proven worthy of my blood," he said. "But remember, Valeria, the crown is not truly yours until you complete the final rite." And that final rite was simple: conquer an entire planet with nothing but your own forces. No reinforcements, no imperial fleets, just you and the soldiers you command. Valeria had spent 5 years studying Earth, not because it was difficult to conquer, but because it was intriguing. Humans, though weak biologically, possessed a rich culture and an astonishing creative drive. They constantly evolved, adapted, and learned. In fact, among all species ranked under 20 points, humans were the only ones who had independently developed spaceflight without outside intervention. "It's a shame to destroy such an interesting specimen," Valeria once mused to her science advisors. "But tradition is tradition." For 23 years, Valeria had been sculpted into the perfect Gravian. She stood nearly 2 meters tall with platinum hair, cascading down to her waist, in skin so pale it was almost translucent, the fine crystalline veins beneath glittering under light. Her amethyst eyes, hallmark of the royal line, could see through darkness and detect even the faintest signs of deceit. And it wasn't just her looks. Her mind was sharper than any blade. She spoke 17 galactic languages, fluently solved quantum equations in her head, and had an eidetic memory able to recall every detail she had ever seen, even for a fleeting second. In her 23 years of life, Valeria had never once tasted defeat, never once failed to take what she desired, and never, not even in her darkest nightmares, imagined herself bowing before any creature. She once nearly executed a court official for introducing her with an incomplete title at a diplomatic event. The poor man had quickly corrected himself. "Esteemed ambassador, allow me to present Princess Valeria Thalaron, heir to the throne of the Gravia Empire." Undefeated in 100 battles, she who never bows. That last title, She Who Never Bows, wasn't just flattery. It was a vow Valeria had sworn to herself as a child. After watching her father force a defeated king to kneel before execution, she had made an oath. I would sooner end my own life than ever bow to another. Valeria Thalaron kneels only to victory, never to anyone. She had once declared this before the entire royal council. And now, as her escape pod hurtled through Earth's atmosphere, those proud, defiant words still echoed in her mind. Even as danger closed in, her pride refused to acknowledge defeat. In her mind, this was nothing more than a temporary setback, a minor obstacle on the road to conquest. I will return, she muttered, as the pod plunged faster, the hull beginning to glow red hot. And when I do, this planet will pay for this humiliation. But what Valeria could not know was that sometimes destiny has plans far greater than conquest. Plans powerful enough to challenge everything even the proudest princess believes. Valeria's escape pod tore through the forest canopy, carving a fiery scar across the ground. The hull screeched and groaned as it twisted and peeled against the earth and stone. The reinforced glass cracked, but by some miracle didn't shatter completely. Inside, Valeria was tossed around like a rag doll. Despite the safety harness, when the pod finally skidded to a stop, silence fell. Only the hissing of cooling metal and the soft whisper of escaping steam remained. Valeria opened her eyes, struggling to regain her senses. Blood from a gash on her forehead ran into her eyes, tinting the world red. Her head pounded viciously, but worse than the physical pain was the burning shame of failure. Communications, she rasped through the smoke. Activate, no response. Every system in the pod was dead. She tried her combat armor, dead as well. The magnetic storm had fried even the smallest circuits. Nothing was coming back online. Damn it! She growled, fighting with the manual release. After 3 desperate tries, the lock finally gave, and she staggered to her feet. The pod's door was jammed. Valeria threw her full weight against it, but it refused to budge. She scanned the wreckage and spotted a broken metal strut, perfect for leverage. With one last surge of effort, she forced the door open. Earth's air rushed in thick, humid, laced with strange scents. A wave of nausea hit her as her body struggled to adjust to the foreign atmosphere. She had been pre-injected with special enzymes to breathe on most planets, but adaptation was never easy. Valeria stumbled outside and immediately took stock of her surroundings. An ancient forest surrounded her, towering trees, dense undergrowth, and no sign of civilization. Night was falling fast, the setting sun bathing the woods in brilliant orange and blood-red light. Perfect, she muttered bitterly. Absolutely perfect. Top priority, re-establish contact with her forces. But without working tech, that was impossible. Valeria quickly stripped off her royal combat armor, now just dead weight. Underneath, she wore a sleek black bodysuit designed to resist most light weaponry. It wasn't as visually intimidating, but it was still very much not of this earth. She cut a thin strip of metal from the wreckage, sharpened it against a rock, and fashioned a crude blade, strapping it to her belt. After checking herself over, she found she was lucky. Aside from the cut on her forehead and some bruises, there were no serious injuries. Gravian physiology healed 3 times faster than that of humans. One last thing remained. She had to destroy the pod. Gravian technology could not be allowed to fall into human hands. From her belt, she pulled out a small device, an emergency thermochemical bomb, one that required no electronics to activate. She tossed it into the wreckage and ran. The explosion was small, but the heat was incredible. Within 30 seconds, the pod had melted into a puddle of scorched, unrecognizable metal. No evidence, no traces. Now she needed shelter. She moved through the forest, heading downhill in search of water, a basic survival tactic she had mastered long ago. This was nothing. She had survived worse during her training, but then as the darkness deepened, Valeria heard something behind her. She spun, knife in hand, every muscle tensed for a fight. Out of the shadows crept a large 4-legged creature, its eyes glowing in the darkness. A wolf, Valeria recognized it immediately from her studies of Earth's fauna and knew this was a fight she didn't want without a real weapon. The wolf growled lowly. 2 more shapes emerged from the bushes, the pack. I don't have time for this, Valeria muttered, tightening her grip on the knife. She could take down 1, maybe even 2, but against a pack injured and unarmed, slim odds. The alpha lunged first. Valeria dodged, but her foot slipped on the damp ground. She fell hard and another wolf immediately closed in. She managed to block the bite with her arm, the combat suit preventing the teeth from sinking in folly. but the impact still sent a shock of pain up her body. Snarling, she drove her makeshift blade into the wolf's side. It yelped and stumbled back, wounded, but the others were circling. She wouldn't last long. Then a gunshot cracked through the night. The alpha howled in pain, blood spraying from its hind leg. Another shot and the pack panicked. Bolted into the shadows, Valeria twisted toward the source of the gunfire knife still ready. A figure stepped out from between the trees. A man, a human. "Hey!" He called out, his voice low and steady. "You all right?" He held a hunting rifle loosely in one hand, barrel pointed at the ground. Heard a hell of a racket, then saw the light, figured I'd find something weird out here. Valeria didn't answer right away. She studied him carefully, weighing every possibility. By human standards, he was average, maybe 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, messy dark hair tousled by the wind, a few days' worth of stubble across his jaw. Sharp green eyes watched her, cautious but not hostile. He wore a worn leather jacket, jeans, and carried a small backpack. "I'm fine," she said at last, forcing herself to mimic the Earth speech pattern she had studied. "Just got lost." The man stepped closer, the moonlight revealing his features more clearly. Not unattractive, Valeria noted clinically. Strong features, a small scar on his chin, and eyes that hinted at a sharp mind rare among low-tier species. "Lost?" he echoed skeptically, eyeing her up and down. "Out here in the middle of a national forest, wearing whatever the hell that is, with a head wound." Valeria cursed herself. Of course her combat bodysuit would look strange. She needed a believable story, and fast. "Accident," she said quickly. "I was testing a prototype, a personal flight device. Private project, not commercial. It malfunctioned. I crashed." Not entirely a lie, but not exactly the truth either. The man didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded, accepting it for now. "Jack Wheeler," he said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Mechanical engineer, and probably the only guy within 30 miles who can help you." Valeria straightened, wiping the blood from her forehead. "Valeria," she replied, choosing to keep her real name, "and I don't need help." Jack chuckled, a deep, genuine sound that startled her. "Sure you don't," he said. "You just fought off a wolf pack with a stick. You're bleeding and you're standing out here alone. Sounds like you've got it all under control." Valeria opened her mouth to snap back, but closed it again. He wasn't wrong. She needed shelter, she needed information, and she needed to stay hidden. "I would appreciate assistance," she said grudgingly, the words tasting like stones in her mouth. "Temporarily." Jack nodded as if he'd expected that. "My cabin's about 2 miles from here," he said. "Not exactly 5-star accommodations, but it's got hot water and a clean bed. You look like you could use both." He shrugged off his leather jacket and held it out to her. "Here it'll get cold once the sun goes down." Every instinct in her rebelled. In Gravian culture, accepting anything from a lesser species was beneath her, but survival overruled pride. Valeria accepted the jacket. It was warm, and carried the faint, strange scent of wood smoke, leather, and something else she couldn't name. "Not unpleasant, thank you," she said stiffly. "Don't mention it." Jack smiled. "I'm guessing you've got one hell of a story to tell, but let's save it until we're somewhere the wolves won't come back for seconds." They set off through the forest, Jack leading the way. He flicked on a small flashlight, carving a narrow path of light through the growing darkness. Valeria watched the way he moved, confident, familiar with this wild terrain, but always alert. Not a soldier, but not helpless either. "So you're an inventor?" Jack asked casually after a while. "Must be a pretty advanced prototype to crash you all the way out here." "Something like that," Valeria replied carefully. "My experiments aren't exactly government approved. I prefer to work independently." Jack chuckled, a sound of understanding. "Yeah," he said. "That's why I live out here too. Freedom away from the labs and red tape." Valeria almost asked what Silicon Valley was, but she caught herself just in time. She would have to tread very, very carefully if she wanted to survive this world. "What are you doing out here?" she asked instead, thinking it's safer to keep him talking. "In the middle of nowhere like this." Jack was quiet for a moment before answering. "I'm building something," he said finally. "Something that could change the way we think about energy. At least that's the hope." He gave a small, almost self-deprecating smile. "Big companies don't like people like me. They prefer the status quo. Keep making money off oil and coal. So I came out here where no one can tell me not to try." Valeria found herself genuinely curious. This man, this so-called inferior being, by Imperial standards, had such fierce belief in his ability to change the world. It wasn't what she had been taught about humans. They continued walking in silence for a long while. Valeria noticed Jack stealing glances at her now and then, obviously curious about the strange woman he had just rescued, but he was polite enough not to push a rare trait. Finally, after nearly an hour of trekking through the forest, they reached a small clearing. In the middle of it stood a two-story wooden cabin, sturdy, well-built, and far more refined than anything Valeria had expected from a human dwelling. "Here we are," Jack said, unlocking the door and flipping on the lights. "Like I said, not a five-star hotel, but..." Valeria stepped inside and found herself surprised. The cabin wasn't crude at all. It was warm, cozy, with a large stone fireplace at its center, comfortable armchairs scattered around, and shelves packed full of books. One wall had been converted into a workspace, tools, blueprints, and even a personal computer set neatly in place. "Bathroom's over there," Jack said, pointing. "First aid kit's in the medicine cabinet. You should clean up that cut. I'll get some food going." For the first time since crashing to Earth, Valeria felt a flicker of something like relief. Maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. She would recover, figure out how to contact her forces and complete her mission. But as she stepped into the bathroom and caught sight of herself in the mirror, grimy bruised the cut on her forehead, still bleeding her platinum hair. A tangled mess. A strange thought crossed her mind. That man Jack had saved her. He had offered her shelter, warmth, safety. Without asking for anything in return, he, a human, a low-tier creature by Imperial classification, had shown her a kind of kindness and law she had rarely if ever seen, even within the Gravia Empire. And the most unsettling part, Valeria didn't hate it. Valeria stood under the shower, letting the hot water cascade over her aching body. On Gravia, water was a precious commodity, strictly rationed even among the royal family. But here in this tiny cabin, tucked deep in the wilderness of a low-tier planet, hot water flowed freely without limit. It was the first thing about Earth that truly unsettled her. When she stepped out of the bathroom wearing the clothes Jack had left outside the door, a baggy t-shirt and drawstring sweatpants, she found him preparing dinner. The rich aroma of food filled the warm air of the cabin, and to her dismay, her stomach growled loudly. "Feeling better?" Jack asked, without turning around. He was stirring something in a large pot on the stove. "Better," Valeria replied, settling into a wooden chair by the table. Her eyes stayed locked on his broad back, the way his muscles shifted beneath his shirt as he moved. "The injury is minor." Jack turned, setting two steaming bowls on the table alongside a loaf of fresh bread. Valeria eyed the food skeptically. Vegetables and meat swimming in a hearty broth. Could Earth food even be safe for her to eat? "Don't worry," Jack said, smiling, as if he could read her mind. "Nothing weird in there, just vegetable stew with some venison. Bagged it a couple days ago." Valeria nodded cautiously and took a small sip. The taste exploded in her mouth, rich, savory, alive in a way the sterile lab-processed food of Gravia had never been. Before she could stop herself, a small, involuntary sound of pleasure escaped her lips. "Good." "Huh," Jack said clearly, pleased. "My mom's recipe..." "Satisfactory," Valeria said stiffly, trying not to show how impressed she actually was. A Gravian princess didn't gush over anything from a so-called inferior race. They ate in silence for a while. Valeria watched Jack when he wasn't looking. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident, but not arrogant, that intrigued her. On Gravia, everyone was constantly trying to outshine one another, always battling for dominance. But this man, he seemed completely at peace with himself. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "So," he said, a twinkle of humor in his eyes, "are you going to tell me the real story, or are we sticking with the personal flight device tale?" Valeria stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Come on, I don't know what you're hiding, Valeria, if that's even your real name, but I know when someone's lying. And that outfit you were wearing when I found you, I've worked with the military long enough to know it's not civilian gear. Hell, it's not even prototype civilian gear." Valeria's heart kicked into overdrive. She could kill him right now, a quick strike to the throat, clean and silent. No one would know, no one would find her, but then she did something she hadn't planned. Something even she couldn't explain. She told part of the truth. "I'm an agent," she said quietly. "I work for an organization I can't name. My mission was classified. The crash wasn't part of the plan." Jack studied her for a long moment, weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. That makes more sense, he said. Explains the combat scars I spotted on your arms. Those don't come from a lab accident. Valeria cursed herself for not being more careful. The loose t-shirt exposed faint lines on her arms, ancient scars, trophies from brutal Gravian training. I can't tell you more, she said, aiming for a tone that was both mysterious and professional. I get it, Jack said, flashing a quick smile. I don't need to know. But if you need help getting back to your organization, I'll help. As long as it doesn't involve killing anybody. Valeria felt a strange, unexpected relief. He believed her a version of the truth bent, but not broken. Thank you, she said, and this time the words didn't feel quite so heavy on her tongue. After dinner, Jack showed her a small room upstairs. A single bed, a wooden dresser, a window overlooking the dark forest. Simple but clean and safe. I'll be downstairs if you need anything, he said from the doorway. Oh, and by the way, no cell service out here. Satellite internet's been down for 2 days. If you need to contact your people, we'll have to drive into town about 30 miles. Valeria nodded, masking her frustration. There would be no contacting her forces anytime soon. We'll figure it out tomorrow, she said. For now, I need to rest. Jack gave her a nod, wished her good night, and pulled the door closed behind him. As his footsteps faded down the stairs, Valeria sat on the bed, truly taking stock of her situation. For the first time, she was stranded on an alien planet, alone. No communications, no weapons, trapped in the home of a man from a species she was meant to conquer. Things couldn't have been worse. And yet, when she thought about Jack, about how he had saved her without expecting anything in return, about the meal he had cooked, about the sincerity she saw in his eyes, she found herself whispering the words aloud as if trying to remind herself. A lesser being. But somehow the words no longer carried the weight they once did. The next days passed in a strange, almost comforting rhythm. Jack didn't rush to take Valeria into town. A storm had flooded the only road out, and they had no choice but to wait. Valeria wasn't sure if it was sheer coincidence or if fate itself was conspiring to keep her here away from her mission. While they waited, she started to learn more about Jack's life. He wasn't just an engineer, as he had claimed he was a genius. In the small workshop behind the cabin, he was developing a new type of battery, one that could store solar energy 10 times more efficiently than current Earth technology. If successful, it could revolutionize how humans powered their world. Big companies want to keep us hooked on fossil fuels, Jack explained one afternoon while they worked side by side in his workshop. Valeria had offered to help, partly out of curiosity, partly to keep herself busy. They don't want real solutions to the climate crisis. So I had to come out here where no one can tell me not to try. You really believe one person can change the world? Valeria asked, genuinely curious. Jack looked up from the blueprints, a soft smile tugging at his lips. I believe if enough people each change a little, the world shifts. I'm just doing my part. Like the story of the hummingbird. Hummingbird, Valeria frowned. It's an old native legend, Jack said. One day a wildfire broke out and all the animals fled, except for a little hummingbird who kept flying back and forth from the river carrying tiny drops of water in its beak to sprinkle on the flames. A bear asked, "What are you doing?" "You can't put out the fire with just a few drops." And the hummingbird said, "I know, but I'm doing all I can." Valeria was silent, mulling over the story. On Gravia, individuals meant nothing. Only the empire and the collective strength mattered. The idea of a single being trying to change something far bigger than themselves was strange, but somehow beautiful. At night, they often sat by the fire. Jack would tell her about his life, growing up in a small town, his parents who taught him to respect nature, winning a scholarship to college, and walking away from a lucrative corporate career to chase his dream. Valeria listened, and slowly she found herself sharing pieces of her own story, a version carefully edited for human ears. She spoke of growing up in a strict organization, of a harsh father, of a life devoid of affection. She didn't lie, she just left out the parts about being an alien princess. "It's sad," Jack said one night, voice low. "Growing up without love. I was lucky." Valeria wanted to snap that she didn't need love, that it was a useless luxury for those too weak to pursue greatness. But the words wouldn't come. Not with the firelight dancing across Jack's face. Not with the way he looked at her, a genuine, steady kind. 1 week passed, then 2. The road was still flooded, but somehow Valeria wasn't in such a hurry to leave anymore. She began helping Jack more seriously with his battery project, offering insights into physics she'd learned on Gravia, carefully filtered to fit human understanding. Jack was stunned by her brilliance. "You're a real genius, you know that," he said one day laughing after she corrected a flaw in his calculations. "You should be working for NASA, not whatever it is you actually do." Valeria just smiled. She couldn't tell him that, by Gravian standards, her knowledge was ordinary, that she was deliberately slowing herself down to avoid suspicion. Even at half speed, her help accelerated Jack's project dramatically. Each breakthrough left him giddy with excitement, and slowly Valeria found herself drawn into it too. It was a feeling she had never experienced while conquering planets. One stormy night, after a major breakthrough in the battery design, they celebrated it. Jack opened a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. They sat on the rug in front of the fire, drinking and talking long into the night. "You know," Jack said, his voice slightly slurred with drink, "these past few weeks, even though they started with your crash, they've been the best time I've had in years." Valeria felt a strange heat rising in her chest, and it wasn't from the whiskey. She wasn't used to this feeling. "I haven't minded it either," she admitted. Eyes fixed on the fire, Jack edged closer. "Valeria," he said softly, "I don't know where you came from or who you really are, but I do know this. You're the smartest, strongest, most incredible woman I've ever met." She looked up and found him watching her with a gaze unlike any she had ever seen. Not the reverence people gave a princess, not the fear people showed an heir to the throne, just pure, honest admiration for her. And in that unguarded moment, without thinking, Valeria did something she had never done before. She kissed him. It was brief, only a few seconds, but enough to turn her entire world upside down. When they pulled apart, Jack was staring at her wide-eyed with a stunned but happy smile. "Wow," he whispered, "I shouldn't have done that," Valeria said immediately, panic rising in her chest. What had she just done? Kissing a human, a low-tier creature. If the Empire ever found out, she would be stripped of her titles, maybe even executed for defiling the royal bloodline. "Why not?" Jack asked gently. "I'm not complaining. You don't understand," she said, standing up, quickly flustered. "I'm not who you think I am." "I know you're hiding something," Jack said, rising too, "but I don't care, Valeria. I've spent weeks working with you, talking with you, seeing the way your mind works, the way you are. I know you, whatever your past is." Valeria felt tears prick her eyes, a foreign, terrifying sensation. On Gravia, tears were a sign of unforgivable weakness. But here in this warm little cabin with this man, she felt safe enough to be weak. "You can't say that," she whispered. "You don't know what I've done." Jack stepped closer and with the gentlest touch, cupped her cheek. "Then tell me." And for one brief, shattering second, Valeria almost did. Almost. But duty, loyalty, and 23 years of brutal conditioning pulled her back. "I can't," she said, stepping slow. "I need to sleep." "We both do." She fled upstairs, leaving Jack standing alone by the fire. That night, Valeria couldn't sleep. She lay on the small bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind a whirlpool of doubt and conflict. Who was she now? Where did her loyalty lie? With the Empire, with Jack, with herself? And then a cold, ruthless thought entered her mind. If she killed Jack, took his truck, and made it to town, she could find a way to contact her fleet, complete her mission, return to her rightful place. Late that night, she crept down the stairs, a makeshift knife in hand. She moved silently to Jack's bedroom, easing the door open. The moonlight spilled in through the window, illuminating his face in peaceful sleep. He had no idea how close death was. Valeria raised the knife, aiming for a swift, clean strike. It would be painless. He wouldn't even know. But when she pressed the blade against Jack's warm skin, her hand began to tremble. Valeria didn't kill Jack that night. She lowered the knife quietly, backed out of his room, and spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor of her own, trying to understand why she couldn't complete such a simple task. She had killed countless beings before since she was 8 years old. Why was this man different? When dawn came, she made a decision. She would wait one more day. If the weather cleared, she convinced Jack to take her into town, leave without hurting him. A small concession to these strange, unexplainable feelings she couldn't deny. But fate, as always, had other plans. That morning, Valeria was in the shower when she heard a noise from her room. She threw on a bathrobe and rushed upstairs, only to find Jack standing by her small dresser where she had hidden her combat underlayers. "I was just looking for extra towels," he said, but his voice had changed, cold, tense. In his hand was a small metal band, the royal ID device she had removed the first night she arrived. But I found this, Valeria froze. For a moment, time itself seemed to halt between them. What is it? She asked, trying to sound casual. Don't, Jack said, raising a hand. Don't lie to me. I've worked with tech long enough to know this isn't from Earth, and these symbols. He pointed at the delicate engravings on the band. I've studied a lot of languages, Valeria. If that's even your real name, and I've never seen anything like this. Valeria's heart pounded, but her face remained impassive. A lifetime of training kept her calm even now. Jack, she said evenly, give it back to me. I'll explain everything. Explain what? That you've been lying to me since the day we met. His voice rose angry, yes, but there was pain there too. Who are you? Where are you from? And why are you really here? Valeria realized she had no choice. The truth had to come out. She moved to the bed, sat down slowly. I'm not from Earth, she said, voice low. I come from Gravia, a planet 67 light years away. Jack didn't react with the shock she expected. Instead, he just nodded as if confirming a suspicion he had already formed. So why are you here to observe, to learn? Valeria met his gaze without flinching. To invade, she said simply. I was leading the vanguard of the Gravia Empire, or at least I was, until my ship was brought down by an unexpected magnetic storm. Jack's face changed. He stepped back, then another step, as if realizing he was in the room with a loaded gun. Invade, he echoed, his voice hoarse. You came here to invade Earth. To what? Kill us, enslave us. Expand the Empire, Valeria answered, slipping into the formal, detached tone she knew so well. It was easier this way to hide behind duty and mission. My people have traveled the galaxy, bringing order and progress. Earth was simply next on the list. Jack shook his head, his eyes burning with rage. Progress, he spat. You call slaughtering innocent people progress? All conquests require sacrifice, Valeria said, though for the first time she heard doubt in her own voice. Sacrifice, Jack nearly shouted. That's what you call mass murder. Jesus Christ, I saved you. I cared for you. I trusted you. He stopped, his chest heaving, and then in a voice so raw it broke her heart. I started to fall in love with you. The last word hit Valeria like a physical blow, love. A concept almost non-existent in Gravian culture. Romantic love seen as a primitive weakness, an evolutionary relic unfit for a superior race. I didn't ask you to, she said, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Jack stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. How many others are with you? He demanded. Where are they now? Are they attacking us? Valeria hesitated. Giving away intelligence to a potential enemy was high treason on Gravia. But Jack wasn't an enemy anymore, not to her. He was something else, something she had no word for. 6 other ships, she finally said. I don't know where they are now. My communication systems were destroyed in the crash. Jack paced the small room, wrestling with what he'd just heard. Then suddenly he stopped, and when he turned back to her, there was a new fire in his eyes. Get up, he said, voice hard as steel. We're leaving now. Where? Valeria asked, not moving. Town, Jack said. I have friends there, ex-military scientists. They'll know what to do with you and with the information you have. Valeria rose slowly. You're going to turn me in, she said. Hand me over to your government. Not the government, Jack shook his head. They're too slow, too bureaucratic. We need immediate action. I have contacts, people ready for a day like this. They'll know how to resist your invasion. Resistance, Valeria murmured, understanding. Now, call it whatever you want, Jack said, but we're going 5 minutes. When Valeria didn't move fast enough, Jack pulled a thin rope from his pocket. I don't want to tie you up, he said, but I will if I have to. Valeria gave a bitter smile. You really think rope can hold me, Jack? I know it can't, he said grimly, but I also know this. He pulled a small handgun from his waistband. I don't want to use it, Valeria, but this is about the survival of my people. Valeria looked at the gun, then at Jack, and she realized he meant it. He would shoot her if he had to. And astonishingly, she respected him for it. Fine, she said, I'll come with you. But we talk on the way. She pointed at the metal band still in his hand. And I need that. Not a chance, Jack snapped. It's not a weapon, Valeria said, calm and steady. It's an ID device. Without it, if we run into my people, they'll think I'm human. They'll kill me on sight. Jack hesitated. Then reluctantly, he tossed the band to her. Valeria slipped it onto her wrist, feeling a small, cold relief as it clicked into place. "Now," Jack said, raising the gun again, "get dressed. We leave in 5 minutes and don't try anything." He turned and walked out the door, closing heavily behind him. Valeria stood there for a long moment, the weight of her choices pressing down like a mountain. Then without a word, she began to get ready. After Jack left the room, Valeria quickly threw on the jeans and t-shirt he had loaned her during the past few days. She could have taken him down easily, a swift kick to disarm the gun, a precise strike to the neural cluster at his neck. He'd be unconscious for hours and she could escape, but she didn't. Part of her wanted to follow Jack to see what he would do, to understand more about this man who had saved her, cared for her, and now was preparing to hand her over to her enemies. When she stepped outside, Jack was waiting there, gun still steady in his hand. Without a word, he led her downstairs out the door and over to the battered Jeep parked beside the cabin. "Get in," he ordered, nodding toward the passenger seat. Valeria complied. As Jack started the engine and drove onto the muddy trail, she stared out the window, watching the dense forest blur past. She had grown fond of Earth's landscape, its wild, chaotic beauty, so different from the cold, geometric perfection of Gravia. They drove for nearly 10 minutes in tense silence before Valeria finally spoke. "You should know," she said, eyes fixed ahead. "Even if you succeed in building your little resistance, you can't stop the Empire forever. They'll send reinforcements, more ships, a whole fleet." "Then we'll fight a fleet," Jack replied, never taking his eyes off the road. "We've been fighting each other for centuries, Valeria. But when an outside enemy comes, humanity has a way of pulling together like nothing you've ever seen." "We've conquered hundreds of planets," Valeria said, voice calm. "Many more advanced than Earth." "I don't care," Jack snapped. "Maybe we won't win, but we'll make damn sure they pay for every inch they take." Valeria couldn't help but admire his spirit, a quality she had been taught to respect even in enemies. They drove on in silence, the trail growing rougher and more treacherous. Finally, Valeria broke the quiet. "You know," she said, "I had the chance to kill you last night." Jack glanced at her sharply, surprise flickering across his face. "I came into your room," she continued. "With a knife, I was going to slit your throat in your sleep, steal your truck, and get to town to call my fleet." "Why didn't you?" Jack asked, voice low. Valeria looked out at the towering trees swaying in the breeze. "I don't know," she admitted. "My hand had started to shake." Jack said nothing, but she could feel the tension radiating from him, feel him grappling with what that confession meant. Suddenly, the road ahead was blocked by a fallen tree. Jack cursed under his breath and slowed the Jeep. "We'll have to turn around, find another path," he muttered. As he shifted into reverse, Valeria caught a flash of movement in the forest, a flicker of blue light, the telltale glow of Gravian energy weapons. "Jack down," she shouted, shoving him beneath the dashboard just as a blast of energy ripped through the windshield where his head had been moments before. "What the hell?" Jack shouted, scrambling, but Valeria was already yanking him from the Jeep, dragging him behind the vehicle for cover. "Gravia," she hissed. "A scout team. They've found us." Sure enough, 3 figures emerged from the tree line. Gravian soldiers, fully armored, moving with lethal grace. They were smaller than Valeria remembered, a sign they came from a different ship, not hers. "A squad from another ship," she whispered to Jack. "They're hunting me." "Will they kill us?" Jack asked, gripping his handgun. "They'll kill you," Valeria said grimly. "What they'll do with me depends on how I explain why I'm with a human." Jack looked at her, and Valeria could see the trust that once lived in his eyes was gone. "So you're still loyal to Thayer," he said bitterly. "I'm not," Valeria started, then faltered. Who was she now? Where did she truly belong? There was no time to answer. The soldiers were closing in, weapons ready. A harsh voice barked something in Gravian, ordering whoever was hiding to surrender. This was it, the moment of no return. If she stood up and claimed her rank, Jack would die. The invasion would roll on. Millions would suffer. She looked at Jack one last time, saw not fear but quiet sadness in his eyes. A silent mourning for what might have been. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And then in a split-second decision that changed everything, Valeria grabbed Jack's gun, sprang to her feet, and fired. She didn't shoot to kill. She shot to distract. "Run!" She screamed at Jack, charging straight toward the Gravian soldiers. The shock of seeing a white-haired woman in human clothing attack stunned the soldiers just long enough. Valeria disarmed one, sent another sprawling with a brutal kick, and ripped the weapon from the third's grasp using elite royal combat techniques. It all happened in seconds. When she turned, she saw Jack still frozen, mouth open in disbelief. "I said run!" she shouted. "Valeria!" One of the soldiers gasped, stunned. "Princess Valeria." Valeria stood tall, energy weapon now aimed steadily. "Yes, Captain," she said coldly. "It's me." "But why?" the soldier stammered. "Why protect a human?" It was the same question burning out inside her. Why betray everything she was raised to be? She glanced at Jack, who stood watching her, a man who had shown her kindness, trust, and a different way to live. Because I said at last, "I've learned more in my time here than I ever did serving the Empire." "That's treason, Princess," another soldier growled, regaining his footing. "Maybe it is," Valeria said, voice unwavering. "I don't care anymore." The soldiers hesitated, trained to obey royalty, but paralyzed by her betrayal. Jack moved to her side. "You just saved my life," he said softly. "And you saved mine," Valeria replied, never taking her eyes off the Gravian squad. "I think we're even now." Jack looked between her and the soldiers. Then, without thinking, he reached out and took her free hand. "Why, miss?" he asked simply. Valeria met his gaze, those fierce green eyes that had seen her not as a tool but as a person. "Because you showed me another way," she said quietly. "A world where people aren't judged by biology or hierarchy, but by what they do, by how they treat others." The soldiers advanced cautiously, weapons raised. "Stop," Valeria commanded, her voice ringing with royal authority. "If you still honor the bloodline, you will listen to me." They froze reluctantly. "The Empire was wrong," she said loud and clear. "Humans are not inferior. They deserve respect. They deserve peace. This invasion must end." "That's blasphemy, Princess," the captain said. "Maybe," Valeria said. "But it's the truth." The soldiers hesitated, then, as if receiving some unseen signal, they raised their weapons. "I'm sorry, Princess," one said grimly, "but the Emperor gave us standing orders. Any operative compromised by local ideology is to be neutralized." Valeria stiffened, a secret directive one she had never been told. Before she could react, Jack tackled her to the ground as energy blasts tore through the space where she had been standing. Valeria rolled to her feet, returning fire, forcing the Gravian soldiers back into cover. "Move!" she shouted. Dragging Jack into the trees, they ran, leaving the jeep, the soldiers, everything behind. "You saved my life," Valeria said as they sprinted. "Guess we're even again," Jack panted. They plunged deeper into the forest, winding through dense brush and rocky terrain, until finally Valeria pulled him into a small ravine hidden by thick vines. "We need to talk," she said, breathing hard but steady. "Everything just changed." Jack, still catching his breath, nodded. "You chose our side," he said. "I chose what's right," Valeria said, voice steady but full of something new, something hard and unbreakable. "I chose freedom." "Why?" Jack asked, eyes boring into her. "I need to understand why risk everything for us." Valeria looked away for a moment, then back at him. "Because in the last 2 weeks, you've shown me more kindness, more courage, and more integrity than I saw in 23 years on Gravia. You saved me without knowing who I was. You cared for me without asking for anything. You made me feel like a person, not just a weapon." She swallowed hard. "I couldn't let you die. I couldn't let millions like you die. Not anymore." Jack studied her in silence. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "So what do we do now?" Valeria thought fast. "I know their protocols, their weaknesses. Earth's magnetic fields are stronger than most planets. It's what brought my ship down. If we can create an artificial magnetic pulse strong enough," Jack's eyes widened, "we could disable their entire fleet." "Exactly," Valeria said, a fierce determination rising in her chest. "You have the engineering skills. I have the knowledge. Together we can do this." "But we'll need help," Jack said. "We'll need to get to town. Materials, people." "Then we go to town," Valeria said. "Not to surrender, but to fight." Jack looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled grimly. "All right," he said. "We do this together, but if you betray us..." "I won't," Valeria interrupted, her voice fierce. "I already betrayed my own people for this. There's no going back for me. Jack, I chose my side. I chose you." The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Jack reached out, cupping her face in his calloused hand. "If you want to live," he said softly, You have to fight for humanity. Not just for me, for all of us. Can you do that? Valeria pressed her hand over his, feeling the warmth, the strength. I can, she whispered. I will, for freedom. For this world, for everything we can still save. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Valeria Thalaron knew exactly who she was. No longer a weapon, no longer a princess, but a fighter for a future she was ready to bleed for. Jack squeezed her hand once fiercely. Then let's go, he said. We've got a world to save. 4 days after their clash with the Gravian soldiers, Valeria and Jack finally made it to Highland Creek, a small town tucked deep in the mountains far from the noise and sprawl of the big cities. Their journey hadn't been easy. They traveled mostly by night, avoiding main roads but battling relentless rain that turned every path into a swamp of thick mud. Through it all, Valeria's mind was a storm of its own. What had she done? She had betrayed the Empire, betrayed her father, betrayed everything she was taught to worship. On Gravia, there was no greater sin than treason. She still remembered vividly the public executions she had been forced to watch as a child. Traitors paraded before the masses, stripped of all honor, and slowly publicly killed as a warning to others. Now she was one of them. You said your friend's ex-military, Valeria asked as they sat in a small coffee shop on the edge of town, trying to stay as inconspicuous as possible. She wore a baseball cap pulled low to hide her platinum hair. Mike was special forces. Jack nodded, eyes constantly scanning the room for threats. But more importantly, he knows about things that aren't exactly official. Alien things. Will he believe us? He's smart enough to recognize the truth when he sees it. Jack said, though Valeria could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Mike arrived exactly at 1 p.m. as arranged through a payphone call made earlier that morning. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and sharp, watchful eyes. He scanned the coffee shop before walking straight to their table and sitting down without a word. You're the alien, he said bluntly, staring straight at Valeria. Valeria glanced around nervously, worried someone might overhear, but the shop was nearly empty, and the lone waitress was busy at the far end. Yes, she admitted, I'm Gravian. Mike studied her carefully, then turned to Jack. You said she came here to invade and now she wants to help us. That's right, Jack nodded. And she has information we need about their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. Mike said nothing for a moment, just kept studying Valeria with a soldier's cold clinical gaze. Finally, he spoke. Why the hell should I trust you? It was the question Valeria had been expecting, but that didn't make it any easier to answer. How could she convince this man that she had truly switched sides, that she had walked away from everything she had ever known to protect a world she was sent to conquer? You don't have to trust me, she said at last, voice steady. Not right away. But the Empire is coming. They have technology that will crush Earth's defenses like paper. And I'm your best, maybe only chance to stop them. If they're so powerful, Mike challenged, why betray them? Why stand with the weaker side? Valeria glanced at Jack, then back to Mike. Because, she said, I saw something here. Something I was taught didn't exist. I saw kindness, courage, a strength we've lost on Gravia. And I couldn't let that be destroyed. Mike watched them both, a flicker of understanding passing through his eyes. He said, a small, knowing smile playing at his lips. Jack flushed slightly, but kept his tone professional. We need your skills. Mike Valeria believes we can create a magnetic weapon to disable their fleet, but we can't do it alone. Mike sat back thinking, then pulled out his phone. I need to make a few calls. Stay put. As Mike stepped away to make the calls, Valeria felt a fresh wave of anxiety rise inside her. You trust him? She asked Jack quietly. With my life, Jack said without hesitation. Mike might look rough, but he's the real deal. If he says he'll help, he'll help. When Mike returned, he was all business. I've got a safe house about 20 miles from here, he said. We're going there. I called in a few friends, an electronics engineer and a physicist. They'll meet us tonight. But be warned, there are going to be a lot of questions and not everyone's going to be quick to trust. That's fair, Valeria said, nodding. If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't trust me either. The safe house turned out to be an old warehouse buried deep in the woods, retrofitted into a rough and ready research lab. When they stepped inside, Valeria was stunned by the sheer amount of equipment crammed into the space computers, electronic components, and what looked suspiciously like weapon parts. You were preparing for this, she asked Mike. Not exactly aliens, he admitted with a shrug, but we've always prepared for emergencies. When the government can't or won't protect us, we protect ourselves. Over the next few hours, Mike's team trickled in. First came Elena, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with short black hair, a self-described electronics genius. Then David, a wiry young physics professor who carried himself with surprising confidence. By midnight, the group had hammered out a rough plan using Valeria's knowledge of Gravian tech and its vulnerability to Earth's magnetic fields. They would build a device capable of generating a powerful magnetic pulse. Not enough to disable the entire fleet, but enough to carve out a safe zone, buying them time to launch their next move, hacking into the Gravian communication network and broadcasting a message directly to the Empire. "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard," David said, grinning ear to ear. "I love it." Valeria couldn't help but feel impressed. In a matter of hours, these humans had gone from discovering aliens existed to planning a counterattack. No panic, no denial, just action. Bitter that night, after everyone had drifted off to catch a few precious hours of sleep, Valeria found herself standing alone by a window staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Gravia, her home, the world she had turned her back on. "Can't sleep." Jack's voice was soft as he appeared beside her. "I'm thinking about my father," Valeria admitted, her voice low. "What he would say if he could see me. Now I've done everything he taught me never to do. I betrayed. I showed weakness. I felt." Jack watched her in the moonlight, his eyes gentle. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Valeria was silent for a long moment. "The scariest thing is no," she said quietly. "I'm scared. I'm confused, but I don't regret it. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that actually matters. Not for the Empire, not for duty, but because it's right." Jack stepped closer, his arm brushing against hers. "There's an old saying," he murmured, "only after we've lost everything are we free to do anything." "I have lost everything," Valeria whispered. "My throne, my honor, even my identity. And yet I've never felt stronger." Jack smiled, a soft, proud smile. "That's what we Earthlings call growing up," he said. "Real strength doesn't come from power or position. It comes from knowing who you are and standing up for it." Valeria turned to look at him, and for a moment she wanted to tell him everything, every fear, every doubt, every fragile hope burning inside her. But before she could speak, an alarm blared through the base. "They found us!" Mike shouted from the control room. "Gravians! 3 ships incoming!" The team scrambled. Elena pored over the improvised radar screen, her face pale. "They're closing in from all directions." "How the hell did they find us?" "My ID device," Valeria breathed, looking down at the metal band on her wrist. "I thought I disabled the tracker, but clearly not. They followed me." "We need to evacuate," Mike ordered. "Grab what's essential. We've got 5 minutes." But Valeria knew the truth. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You don't understand. If 3 ships are here, they have already set up a perimeter. There's no way out." "Then what the hell do we do?" David asked, his voice tight. Valeria looked at each of them, her gaze landing last on Jack. "You stick to the plan," she said. "Build the magnetic device. I'll go out there." "No," Jack barked immediately. "They'll kill you." "Maybe not," Valeria said, forcing calm into her voice. "I'm still the heir to the throne. They might want me alive. I can buy you time." "That's a suicide mission," Mike said bluntly. "Not necessarily," Valeria said. "This is my fight too. I'll come back if I can, but you have to finish the device." Jack grabbed her arm as she turned to go. "Valeria, wait, we just found each other." She looked back at him, and in that moment, every wall she had ever built crumbled. She was no longer a Gravian princess. He was no longer just a lowly earthling. They were simply 2 souls standing on the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. "I'll come back, though," she promised, her voice soft but unwavering. "But I need you to live. I need you all to succeed." And then before he could argue, she pulled him close and kissed him. It wasn't a polite, cautious kiss. It was fierce, desperate, a collision of everything she had never been allowed to feel. When they broke apart, she whispered against his lips, "I will come back to you. That's a promise from a Gravian princess, and we never break our promises." Then she turned, stepping out into the night, running toward the blue glow rising among the trees toward the fate she had chosen. Valeria had only made it halfway when they found her. A squad of 12 Gravian soldiers clad in full armor, their energy weapons trained squarely on her. She stopped immediately, raising her hands in a gesture of surrender. Crown Princess Valeria Thalaron. The commander barked, his voice echoing through the combat mask. You are charged with treason against the Empire of Gravia. Surrender immediately. I surrender, Valeria said clearly. In one condition, the humans in this sector must be spared. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Negotiations weren't part of their training, especially not with traitors, even royal ones. We don't have the authority to grant that. The commander finally said, you'll be taken to the command ship for judgment. The fate of the humans will be decided by the Supreme Commander. Supreme Commander, Valeria asked, confused, who's leading the invasion now? Supreme Commander Drax, the soldier replied, appointed personally by Emperor Thalaron. A chill raced down Valeria's spine. Drax, one of the most ruthless generals in the Empire, a man who knew neither mercy nor restraint. If he was in charge, there would be no negotiations. I understand, she said, nodding. Take me to him. The soldiers moved in, clamping heavy Gravian metal cuffs around her wrists, stronger than any earth steel. As they led her away, Valeria stole one last glance toward the hidden base deep in the forest. She had bought Jack and the others some time, but how much she couldn't say. The command ship loomed just a few miles away, parked in a massive clearing. As they approached, Valeria realized this was no ordinary craft. It was a Guardian-class warship, the kind reserved for full-scale planetary operations. The Empire had sent a serious force to Earth. They marched her aboard down cold metal corridors straight to the command deck. There, standing by a wide window overlooking the wilderness below, was Supreme Commander Drax, a towering figure with a face carved from stone and eyes cold as ice. Such a shame, Princess, he said without turning. Your father will be most disappointed to learn his only daughter has become a traitor. I'm not a traitor, Valeria replied, keeping her voice steady. I simply saw a truth the Empire refuses to acknowledge. Humans are not the inferior beings we were taught they were. Drax turned, a thin, humorless smile playing on his lips. And you discovered this after only a few weeks among them? Or perhaps you've simply been compromised by one of these creatures? Valeria ignored the bait. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye. I demand to be treated according to the Royal Conduct Code, she said firmly. That code does not apply to traitors. Drax sneered. But don't worry, we won't kill you, not yet. The Emperor wishes to deal with you personally. A deep shudder ran through Valeria. She knew exactly what deal with meant in her father's vocabulary, and the humans, she pressed. They're civilians, innocent. Drax laughed, a harsh, ugly sound devoid of real amusement. They've made contact with you. They know too much. They are a liability. We will eliminate them. He turned to an officer at the command console. Captain, prepare an assault team coordinates. No, Valeria shouted, surging forward, somehow breaking free from the guard's grip. In one explosive burst of strength, she shattered the cuffs built to restrain an average Gravian, but not a royal-blooded and battle-hardened princess. She lunged at Drax, moving faster than any of them could react, but an invisible force field stopped her cold. Did you really think we wouldn't prepare for your exceptional abilities? Drax sighed as she crumpled to the floor, trapped inside the energy cage. Valeria struggled, but couldn't break free. All she could do was watch helpless as Drax barked orders. Destroy the area, no survivors, and then we proceed to the next phase, New York City. A message to the entire planet. You don't understand, Valeria pleaded, voice cracking. These people, they have culture, art, music, love. They're not animals. We don't care if they are or aren't, Drax said coldly. This is about empire, about power, things you seem to have forgotten. On the monitors, Valeria could see the assault crafts launching, headed straight for Jack and the others. It would all be over in minutes, but then something strange happened. The screens began to glitch. The comm system sputtered with static. All around her, Gravian soldiers clutched their heads, grimacing in pain. What's happening? Drax roared, struggling against the sudden wave of disorientation. Valeria felt it too, a deep vibration, a magnetic pulse rippling through the ship. And then she understood. They did it, she whispered, a fierce smile breaking across her face. They activated the magnetic pulse. The energy field trapping her collapsed. Valeria sprang up, rushing to the nearest control panel. Her fingers danced across the keys, overriding security with her royal clearance codes. Codes that thankfully hadn't been deactivated yet. Stop her. Drax bellowed, staggering toward her, but he was too slow, too weakened. On the main screen, Valeria saw the assault crafts spinning out of control, crashing into each other, falling from the sky like broken toys. Broadcast to all ships, she commanded. Abort mission, return to home base, authorization. Crown Princess Valeria. You have no authority here, Drax snarled, lunging at her. Valeria spun and delivered a brutal punch to his jaw. The crack of bone echoing through the bridge, Drax crumpled to the floor unconscious. Not anymore, she said coldly. The remaining officers stared at her in stunned silence. Valeria stood tall, unshaken. You have two choices, she said, her voice ringing with the authority of true royalty. Follow my command or share Drax's fate. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one by one, they dropped to their knees before her. First one officer, then another, then all of them. Not out of fear, but out of loyalty carved into their very bones since birth. Good, Valeria said. Now bring the ship down in that clearing to the west. I need to meet with the humans responsible for that pulse. The command ship landed with a low hum in a sparse patch of forest. Jack and the others were already waiting, armed and ready for the worst. When the ship's hatch opened and Valeria stepped out alone unchained, Jack was the first to rush to her. You did it, he breathed, awestruck. No, Valeria corrected gently. We did it. Your device disabled an entire command ship. Not even the most advanced worlds we conquered ever managed that. So did we win? Elena asked, disbelief coloring her voice. Not yet, Valeria said. This is just one ship. There are others still patrolling Earth. And if we don't report back, the Empire will send reinforcements. So what the hell are we waiting for? Mike growled, keeping his weapon trained. Because I have a plan, Valeria said, her voice steady, burning with purpose. She laid it all out. Bold, desperate plan that held a glimmer of hope. You'll need to upgrade the magnetic device, she concluded. Stronger field, wider range. It'll be Earth's last line of defense if things go wrong. Let me get this straight, Jack said. You're going to use this ship, your title, to contact your father directly. You'll threaten to expose the truth that the Empire's biological hierarchy is flawed, that humans are far stronger than they realize, and that invading Earth will cost them dearly. Exactly, Valeria nodded, and I'll back it up with proof your technology that neutralized a command ship in minutes. But what if he doesn't believe you? David asked, worried. Then Valeria said, her voice dropping, I'll reveal the truth about Drax and the other generals, the real costs of the Empire's recent wars. The lies they've buried, it'll trigger a political firestorm that will tie up the Empire for years, giving us time to strengthen our defenses, Elena said, catching on. Exactly. There was a long silence as everyone absorbed the enormity of the plan. Finally, Mike spoke. And what's to stop you from betraying us once you're up there? Valeria didn't flinch. Nothing except my word. But you should know this about Gravian royalty. We never break a promise, it's bred into us. Still not good enough, Mike said bluntly. Then Jack will come with me, Valeria said without hesitation. What? Jack blinked. You'll be our witness, our representative. You'll stand beside me when I speak to the Emperor. You'll make sure I keep my word. That's insanely dangerous, Mike warned. I'll protect him with my life. Valeria vowed, every syllable ringing true. Everyone turned to Jack, waiting. He stared into Valeria's eyes for a long moment, searching. Finally, he nodded. I'll go, he said. Not because I don't trust you, Valeria, but because no one should have to face their father alone. A lump rose in Valeria's throat, gratitude, joy, and something even deeper she dared not yet name. Then it's settled, she said. They moved toward the ship. Mike pulled Jack aside, handing him a small device. If it goes bad, hit this button, he said. It'll trigger a massive magnetic blast. Not enough to save the world, but enough to buy you both a chance to escape. Thanks, Mike, Jack said, pocketing the device. As they climbed the ship's ramp, Valeria felt the full weight of her decision. She was returning to her people's ship, but not as their proud conqueror. Not anymore. Now she was something new, a warrior fighting to protect a planet she had once sought to enslave, and a man who had shown her what true courage really meant. Jack walked beside Pierre, his face set with determination, even though she could see the worry behind his eyes. For the first time in human history, a man from Earth was boarding an alien ship, not as a prisoner, not as an experiment, but as a representative, an unofficial ambassador for his entire species. As the ship's hatch began to close behind them, Jack reached for Valeria's hand, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand tightly. A silent promise that whatever awaited them, they would face it together. The ship rumbled beneath their feet as the engines roared to life. Through the window, they could see Elena, David, and Mike watching from below their faces, a mixture of hope. "Are you scared?" Valeria asked softly as the ship began to lift off the ground. "Terrified," Jack admitted with a faint, crooked smile. "But I guess that's part of being human, feeling the fear and moving forward anyway." Valeria nodded, feeling a deep resonance with his words. "It's part of being a true princess too," she said quietly. "Not the absence of fear, but doing what's right despite it." The ship climbed higher and higher, leaving Earth behind a shrinking blue and green orb beneath them. But unlike the first time Valeria had left a planet behind, there was no contempt in her eyes now. No cold calculation. This time she looked down with awe, with genuine admiration for the beautiful, chaotic world she had once scorned, and for the courage of the beings standing beside her as they rose past the stratosphere, hurtling toward the stars. A truth settled firmly in Valeria's heart. She wasn't the same person who had begun this journey. She had set foot on Earth, a proud Gravian princess believing in the innate superiority of her people. Now she continued her journey as someone entirely different, someone who understood that true greatness had nothing to do with bloodlines or birthright. It was forged in the choices we make, the battles we fight inside ourselves. No energy weapons marked their path with thunder this time. Only the soft hum of the ship's engines carried them higher farther, bearing two souls from two worlds now bound by a common purpose, and maybe, just maybe, by something even deeper than that. "The transmission's been cut," Jack said, staring at the blank screen on the control panel. "The Emperor ended the call," Valeria said, her voice thick with emotion. "My father ended the call." She stood frozen before the console, her face pale under the soft blue light of the command deck. The conversation with Emperor Thalaron had not gone as she had hoped. Valeria had believed that, ruthless and arrogant as he was, her father would at least listen to reason. She was wrong. "How long before he reacts?" Jack asked, tension bleeding into his voice. "Not long," Valeria replied, moving swiftly to the main controls. "When my father says he'll personally lead a fleet to annihilate Earth, he doesn't make idle threats. We have maybe 1-2 days before they arrive." "So our plan failed," Valeria confirmed, her fingers flying over the console. "At least plan A did, but I always had a plan B." "What plan?" Jack demanded. "We go back to Earth. We warn everyone, and we use this ship as a weapon." Jack looked around the command deck at the Gravian officers still dutifully manning their stations, seemingly oblivious to their conversation. "You think they'll just let you turn their ship into a weapon against their own empire?" he asked skeptically. "No," Valeria said, exhaling sharply. "That's why I just initiated an emergency evacuation protocol." "Look!" Jack's eyes dropped to the display where a countdown clock was flashing. 00, 10, 00, 09, 59. "We have 10 minutes to get off this ship," Valeria explained. "Everyone will be evacuated to escape pods and sent down to Earth. Meanwhile, the ship will launch itself into deep space, one final message to the Empire." "What message?" Jack asked. "That not every Gravian stands for genocide. That at least one of us chose to stand with humanity." Jack looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You've really changed," he said. "I hope so," Valeria said, offering him a sad smile. "But right now we need to move ahead for the escape pods." They rushed down the corridors, weaving through lines of personnel, moving in orderly fashion, an eerie testament to Gravian discipline, even in an evacuation. "Why isn't anyone asking questions?" Jack whispered as they ran. "Gravians don't question orders from royalty," Valeria explained grimly. "It's bred into them. That's why the Empire lasted so long and why one day it will fall." They reached a large hatch marked Royal Escape Pod, a special pod reserved for members of the royal bloodline, larger and far more sophisticated than the standard models. "We'll take this one," Valeria said, pressing her hand against the biometric scanner. The hatch slid open with a hiss. Inside was a sleek, luxurious craft outfitted with 2 command seats, a fully operational control panel, and enough space to move around him. It looked less like a lifeboat and more like a miniature starship. "Fancy," Jack muttered as they climbed aboard. Valeria immediately dropped into the pilot's chair and began firing up the systems. "This pod has its own defense systems and engines, powerful enough to get us anywhere on Earth. We'll head near your cabin. It's the safest place I can think of right now." The countdown showed 00 hours 4:32 when the escape pod detached from the mothership. All around them, dozens of other pods launched into the atmosphere, scattering toward Earth. Through the window, they watched the massive ship slowly turn its engines, firing up as it began a lonely journey into deep space. "It'll broadcast a continuous message," Valeria said, "a plea from a traitor princess, asking the Empire to abandon the invasion and to recognize humanity as intelligent beings worthy of respect." "And do you think anyone will listen?" Jack asked. "Some will." She nodded. "There are those in the Empire who already have doubts. This will plant seeds that might someday grow into real change. But not soon enough to stop the fleet." "That's coming," Jack said grimly, understanding how little time they had. "No," Valeria admitted, adjusting the controls as the pod began its descent into Earth's atmosphere. "That's why we need to find Mike and the others, their magnetic field device. It's our only real hope now." The re-entry was surprisingly smooth. The Royal Escape Pod had been designed for maximum comfort. Within minutes, they had landed in the forest about half a mile from Jack's cabin. "We need to contact Mike immediately," Jack said as they stepped out of the pod. "No." Valeria shook her head, scanning the surrounding woods with sharp, wary eyes. "First, we make sure we're not being followed. Once the Empire realizes I've defected, they'll send hunters after me, the kind who aren't interested in taking me alive." As if to prove her point, a soft chime came from the metal band around her wrist. Valeria glanced down and her face went pale. "What is it?" Jack asked. "Come on," she said, grabbing his hand and pulling him deeper into the trees. "We have to move now." "Why, what's happening?" "My ID device," she explained as they ran. "It just received a signal, a red code." "What's a red code?" Jack asked, struggling to keep pace. "It means I've officially been excommunicated from the royal bloodline." Valeria said, her face tense. "And the Empire has dispatched the hunting team." They pushed deeper into the woods, Valeria leading with the sure-footedness of someone who had memorized every path over the past few weeks. After nearly an hour of nonstop running, they finally reached Jack's cabin. "We can't stay here," Valeria said the moment they stepped inside. "This will be the first place they search, but we need supplies, food, water, any weapons you have." Jack quickly packed what he could into a backpack. "This hunting team, what exactly are we dealing with?" "They're the Empire's most elite assassins," Valeria explained, peeking through the window to scan the woods. "Biotech enhanced from birth, engineered with heightened senses, increased strength, and a singular purpose to hunt." "So like cyborgs?" Jack asked. "No, they're living beings, but they were created, not born. They have no parents, no families, no identities beyond their mission. They're called the Null, the Empty Ones. And they're good at what they do. They've never failed," Valeria admitted, her voice dropping. "But they've also never been tasked with hunting a member of the royal bloodline. Before I know a few of their weaknesses that others don't." "Like what?" "They rely heavily on tech for tracking tech that the magnetic device can disrupt. And they aren't creative. They follow strict patterns. If we can do something unpredictable." Suddenly, Valeria stiffened, her eyes snapping to the cave's entrance. "Shh," she hissed, signaling Jack to stay silent. "Do you hear that?" Jack strained to listen, but all he could hear was the sound of rushing water. "I don't hear anything," he whispered. "Exactly," Valeria said, her voice tight. "The insects have gone silent." Without another word, she smothered their small fire and pulled Jack deeper into the cave, into the darkest corner where they would be hardest to spot. They waited in tense silence, their hearts pounding. Minutes ticked by like hours. Then they saw it, a tall, shadowy figure gliding past the mouth of the cave, illuminated briefly by moonlight. It wasn't human, not entirely. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, its limbs unnaturally long, its head hairless. Even from a distance, Jack could see its eyes large, round, and faintly glowing in the dark. The figure stopped at the cave entrance, as if sniffing the air. Valeria and Jack held their breath, not daring to move a single muscle. After what felt like an eternity, the figure moved on, disappearing from view. They waited another agonizing hour before either of them dared to whisper. "Was that one of the Null?" Jack asked, his voice trembling. "Yes." Valeria nodded, her face pale, even in the darkness. "And it's tracking us. How did it find us so fast?" "My ID device," Valeria said, glancing down at the metal band around her wrist. "Even though I disabled the transmitter, it can still be used to track me if they get close enough." She twisted the band around her wrist as if searching for a way to remove it. "I have to get rid of it." "Why not just take it off?" Jack asked. "It's not that simple." Valeria shook her head. "It's biologically linked to me. If I remove it the wrong way, it'll trigger a failsafe." What kind of fail-safe? Jack frowned. Instant death, Valeria said bluntly. It's how the Empire ensures royal identification tech never falls into enemy hands. Jack stared at her and the dark horror etched across his face. So what do we do now? We need to reach Mike, Valeria decided. At his base with their equipment, we can generate a magnetic field strong enough to disable this without triggering the failsafe. But how do we get there with those things tracking us? Valeria thought for a moment. We need to throw them off. Split up. How? They were mostly tracking me through the ID signal. If we split up, you can go ahead, get to Mike, and start setting up the magnetic device. I'll draw the hunters away, then double back once I lose them. Jack shook his head fiercely. That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. You're talking about leading these super predators off by yourself. It's the only way, Valeria insisted. You're not fast enough or strong enough to fight them. If they catch us together, we're both dead. At least this way, you have a chance. What about you? Valeria gave him a faint, tired smile. I'm a Gravia princess. I've been trained my whole life to fight and survive. I'll lead them on a chase they won't soon forget. Jack stared at her, trying to find an argument, a reason to refuse. But deep down, he knew she was right. It was the only logical choice. At dawn, we move, Valeria said, her tone brooking no argument. You'll head east toward Mike's base. I'll head north towards the mountains and draw them away. After 3 days, I'll come find you if I can. And if you can't, Valeria didn't answer. Instead, she locked eyes with him. Jack, you have to promise me one thing. If I don't come back, you keep going. You help Mike and the others upgrade the magnetic device. It's Earth's only chance. Jack wanted to argue, to tell her he'd never leave her behind, that he'd find her no matter what. But he knew she was asking what needed to be asked. This was bigger than either of them. I promise, he finally said, his voice rough. But you have to promise me something too. What? Promise me you'll do everything you can to come back. Don't throw your life away unless you have no other choice. Earth needs you. Mike and the others need you. He hesitated, then added softly, I need you. In the darkness, Valeria reached out and cupped his cheek, an unfamiliar gesture, but one that felt utterly natural. I promise, she whispered. I'll do everything I can to come back to you. They sat like that in silence, waiting for dawn and the separation it would bring. And as the night wore on, Valeria realized a terrifying truth for the first time in her life. She was afraid of death, not for its own sake, but for what it would steal from her. It would steal her chance to truly live. It would steal him. And one thing was now seared into her heart with absolute certainty. She would not let Jack die. No matter the price, no matter the sacrifice, no matter the cost to herself, she would make sure he survived, even if it meant facing the one thing every royal Gravia was taught to fear above all else: complete, utter failure. Dawn broke cold and gray, a wet fog wrapping the forest in a heavy shroud. It was time to part ways. Valeria checked her small pack one last time, only the essentials stripped down to move as fast and light as possible. Remember southeast, she reminded Jack. Follow the stream, then turn at the boulder shaped like a bear. You'll find a narrow path leading to a ravine. Cross it and you'll reach the base before nightfall. Jack nodded, but his eyes never left her face. 3 days, he said. I'll wait for you there. 3 days, she agreed, forcing a confident smile. Don't worry, I've survived worse. It was a lie, and they both knew it. No one had ever survived being hunted by the Null. But Jack didn't call her out on it. Instead, he stepped forward and pulled her into a fierce, desperate hug, like this might be the last time. Come back, he whispered into her ear. I don't care how, just come back. I'll try, Valeria whispered back, softer than a breath. Harder than I've ever tried before. They pulled apart, and Valeria caught the shimmer of unshed tears in Jack's eyes. Strange, she thought, how a species deemed inferior could feel so deeply, could love so fiercely. Go, she said, turning away before she could change her mind. And remember, don't look back. Keep moving until you reach the base. Jack nodded one last time, then turned and sprinted east, vanishing into the thick mist. Valeria stood there for a moment longer, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. Only when she could no longer hear him did she turn north and start moving. Not running, moving deliberately, leaving just enough trace that only a Null would pick it up. Come find me, she whispered into the fog. Come on, hunters. Let's see who the real predator is. 3 hours later, Valeria knew they were on her trail. 3 Gnoll moving through the forest with terrifying speed and precision. She could feel them more than see them, a prickling at the back of her neck. A sixth sense carved deep into her royal DNA. She pressed north, luring them into the roughest terrain the mountains had to offer. Steep cliffs, raging streams, dense thickets. More than once they nearly caught her, only for her to slip away by the barest margins, relying on her superior agility and intimate knowledge of the terrain. By the second night, crouched inside a small cave on a mountainside, Valeria knew her plan was failing. They were too good, too relentless. They were closing in, squeezing her into a smaller and smaller section of the range. Soon they would have her, and worse, she was running out of strength. Even Gravia physiology had limits, and she was pushing hers to the edge. Listening to the howling wind outside the cave, Valeria realized she needed a new plan. She couldn't keep running forever. Eventually they would catch her, and then they'd go after Jack. She looked down at the device on her wrist, the root of her problems. If not for it, the Gnoll wouldn't be able to track her so easily. But it was also the only remaining link she had to the Empire, to home to her father. A dangerous, desperate idea began to form. The ID device wasn't just for tracking, it had one final function, an emergency distress transmission designed to send a direct message to the Emperor himself in the event of life-threatening danger. But it could only be used once, and after that it would self-destruct. Valeria had never considered using it, but now faced with certain death and the very real possibility that Jack would die too, she began to see it as her only chance. If you can't win by strength, she whispered to herself, then win by cunning. With renewed resolve, she activated the emergency transmission protocol. The small screen flickered to life. Glowing a cold blue, and a prompt appeared. Transmit direct to Emperor Y.N. Valeria drew a deep, steadying breath. Once she pressed Y, there would be no going back, but she had come too far to stop now. She pressed Y. The screen shifted, preparing to broadcast time, remaining 60 seconds. Valeria closed her eyes, gathering her thoughts. This was her one shot, and she had to use it wisely. No begging, no pleading. This would be a negotiation as a princess, as an heir, as a true Thalaron. When the screen flashed, transmit to Emperor Thalaron, speak now. Valeria opened her eyes and began to speak, her voice clear, steady, unwavering. Father, this is Valeria. I know you see me as a traitor, maybe I am, but I'm still your daughter, still Thalaron by blood. And I'm offering you a deal when only a fool would refuse. She paused, then continued, her tone sharp and calculating. I will provide the Empire with critical intel weaknesses in the military and political infrastructures of the last 12 worlds we've conquered. Information that he had access to, as heir, real casualty numbers, true costs, details, Drax and the other generals kept from you. I'll also give you intel on resistance cells forming on 5 different planets, cells the Empire doesn't even know exist. She took a deep breath. In exchange, I asked for only 2 things. 1, the Empire will leave Earth and never return. This planet and its people will be left in peace. 2, the safety of a specific human whose information I will provide. No pursuit, no harm. She paused again, choosing her next words carefully. This is a fair deal. The information I hold is worth far more than a single world or a single life. You know it, I know it. You have 1 hour to respond. After that, I'll choose another path. With that, she ended the transmission. The device emitted a soft beep, confirming the message had been sent directly to the Emperor's private chamber, bypassing all standard protocols. Now all she could do was wait. 42 minutes later, the device vibrated. Valeria flipped it open to find a short message. Deal accepted with conditions, stand alone on Northern Summit. Deliver all data transport inbound. Valeria frowned. She had expected bargaining. Not swift acceptance, but maybe the information she possessed was more valuable than she'd realized. Another message followed. Upon data verification, human will be granted safety. Earth will be left untouched. Princess Valeria Thalaron will die. Heir will be erased from Imperial records. Your name will never be spoken again. She read the words twice, feeling the weight settle heavily in her chest. It was a death sentence and a total erasure. She wouldn't just be barred from Gravia. Her existence would be wiped clean. Every memory, every record. As if the Emperor Thalaron had never had a daughter at all. Damnatio memoriae, she whispered, recalling an ancient Earth term she had once read in Jack's books. The punishment of erasing someone completely from history. But it was the final line that struck her hardest. This is the Emperor's final decision, not as a father, as a ruler. Valeria closed her eyes, feeling the ache spread through her chest. All her life she had fought for her father's approval for a love he had never truly given. Now he wouldn't even acknowledge her as his own blood. But when the pain passed, something else rose in its place, something fierce and liberating. She didn't have to fight for him anymore. She didn't have to live for him anymore. She was free. And at the cost of that freedom, she would ensure Jack's survival, and Earth's Valeria rose to her feet, a new resolve etched into her features. She knew exactly which summit the message referred to, a bare, jagged peak about 2 miles away. If she left now, she could reach it by dawn. As she stepped out of the cave, she could feel the Null still lurking in the forest, watching, hunting. But now, instead of fear, she felt something closer to pity. They were just tools, same as she had once been. "It won't be long now," she whispered into the darkness. "Your mission will soon be over." Dawn found Valeria standing atop the summit, her platinum hair whipping in the cold wind. Below her, the mountains stretched out like a rolling ocean of stone and green, heartbreakingly beautiful in the pale light. She had already transmitted every piece of intel she had promised, every secret, every vulnerability of the Empire. She had also transmitted Jack's full identification, his name, his location, and even his DNA lifted from a strand of hair she had secretly kept. With that, the Empire could ensure his safety forever. Now all that remained was for her to face the rest of the bargain. She didn't have to wait long. A soft hum echoed overhead, and Valeria looked up to see a small royal transport ship descending from the clouds, sleek and silver, designed for special operations. It hovered over the summit for a moment before slowly landing a few meters away. The hatch opened, and 3 Gravia warriors emerged. Not Null, but elites, the Emperor's personal guards. They approached her with cold, unreadable faces behind their battle masks. "Princess Valeria Thalaron," the lead warrior said, voice devoid of emotion. "Your information has been received and verified by order of the Emperor. The hunters have been recalled. This planet will be exempt from conquest, and the individual known as Jack Wheeler will be protected." Valeria nodded, feeling a deep, aching relief. "They had kept their word. Now for your part of the agreement," the warrior continued. "By order of the Emperor, Valeria Thalaron is no longer of royal blood. Your name will be stricken from all records. Your lineage deemed impure. You are forbidden from setting foot on any Empire-held world. Violate this, and you will be executed on sight." The warrior stepped forward, holding a small device. "Your ID implant will be removed. The process will not be pleasant." Valeria extended her wrist without hesitation. "Do it." The warrior pressed the device against the metal band on her arm. A sharp hiss and a bolt of searing pain shot through her entire arm. Valeria gritted her teeth but made no sound. She would not give them that. When it was over, a faint inverted triangle scar, the royal symbol, remained on her wrist. But now it was pale white instead of regal purple. "It is done," the warrior said, stepping back. "The agreement has been fulfilled. You are nothing now. Not a princess, not Gravia, just a nameless being with no home." Valeria stood tall, meeting their gaze with a pride she hadn't realized she still possessed. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I am still Valeria, and now I am more than I ever was." The warriors said nothing. They turned and marched back to the ship as the hatch sealed and the transport lifted off into the clouds. Valeria didn't watch it leave. Instead, she turned toward the horizon where the sun was climbing higher, bathing the earth in warm golden light. She had done the impossible. She had sold her crown, her lineage, her very existence, traded it all. And in return, she had bought safety for a single man, a man who had taught her the true meaning of courage, of love. As the ship disappeared into the sky, Valeria closed her eyes, feeling the earth's wind brush against her face. A single tear, her first in years, slipped down her cheek. "Goodbye, Father," she whispered. "Goodbye, Gravia." Then she turned her back on the sky and started down the mountain toward the hidden base where Jack was waiting. Each step felt lighter, freer. She was no longer Princess Valeria Thalaron, no longer the heir, no longer the untouchable. Now she was simply Valeria, and for the first time in her life, that was enough. 1 year later, morning sunlight streamed through the small window, casting warm golden beams across the wooden floor. Valeria opened her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of Jack's breathing beside her. She lay still for a moment, listening to the birds outside and to the steady beat of her own heart. It had been a year since she gave up everything to save Earth and the man lying beside her. A year since she was no longer a princess, no longer an heir, no longer a target, Valeria quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Jack. He needed the rest after yesterday, a long day working in the shop, putting the final touches on their new battery prototype. She pulled on an old sweater, a gift from a kind neighbor, and tiptoed outside. Their small house sat at the edge of Pinecrest, a tiny village tucked deep into the mountains over 100 miles from the nearest city. The perfect place for two people trying to live simple, unnoticed lives. Here, a woman with platinum hair and violet eyes was seen as a little different, but nothing more. Valeria stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp morning air. Before her stretched a small garden she had tended all summer, lush with vegetables, flowers, and herbs. Beyond that, dark green mountains loomed under a crystal clear sky, their peaks wrapped in early morning mist. She sat in the wooden chair Jack had built for her last spring, closing her eyes to savor the peace. A year ago, she never would have believed she could find happiness in a life so small. How could a princess born to command billions find contentment in tending a garden, fixing village machines, and sharing a simple home with one man? And yet she had never felt more whole. "Good morning," Jack's voice murmured behind her. She felt his arms wrap around her shoulders, a soft kiss brushed against her hair. "Up early again?" "I love the mornings here." Valeria smiled, tilting her head to look at him. "It's different from Gravia. There the light was always cold, as if the sun itself kept its distance. Here it feels like the sunlight wants to wrap you up." Jack sat down beside her, his arms still draped across her shoulders. "Mike called last night after you fell asleep. They had a successful test on the third battery model. It means we're ready for trial production." Pride swelled inside her. The solar energy storage device they had developed, a blend of Earth science and Gravia knowledge, had the potential to revolutionize how humans powered their world. No one except the small circle that had helped them stop the invasion knew the technology had off-world origins. "That's incredible," she said, nodding. "It's only the beginning." "Beginning of what?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. "Changing Earth from the inside out." Valeria smiled. "Making it stronger, cleaner, harder to target by any other civilizations out there." Jack squeezed her shoulder gently. "Always thinking about how to protect us." "Not just you," she admitted softly. "I'm doing it for me too. This is my home now. I want to make it better." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching sunlight flood the valley. Moments like these were precious moments Valeria had once thought she would never even know to cherish. "I dreamed about Gravia last night," she said, suddenly, her voice low. "About the crystal spire palace, the towers scraping the sky, and my father sitting on his throne, cold and distant as always." Jack listened quietly. He knew these dreams came to her, sometimes ghosts from a life she had left behind. "In the dream, I stood before him, waiting for judgment," Valeria continued. "But instead of fear, I felt pity. Pity for a man who never knew how to love, who never knew the joy of a garden at dawn, or the smile of a kind neighbor." She turned to Jack, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I woke up and realized I don't miss it anymore. I don't crave the throne or the power. I'm just grateful for what I found here." Jack gently took her hand, turning it over to trace the small inverted triangle scar on her wrist, the last remnant of her royal past. "You still think of them sometimes," he said. "It wasn't a question sometimes," Valeria admitted. "Not because I want to go back, but because they're a part of me whether I like it or not. I wonder if any of them changed after everything I gave them, if anyone started to question how they see the universe." "Maybe someday you'll find out," Jack said. "Maybe." She agreed, knowing it was unlikely. Part of the agreement was clear: she could never contact the Empire again. "But it doesn't matter to me like it used to." "Yeah," Jack checked his watch. "I need to head to the workshop early today. David and Elena are coming to help set up the production line." "I'll meet you there later," Valeria nodded. "I want to harvest some vegetables first. Mrs. Jenkins will love fresh carrots for her soup." Jack stood leaning down to kiss her, a kiss soft, lingering, and full of quiet devotion. When they broke apart, he looked at her with that same gaze that still made her heart race. "I love you," he said simply, using the casual, everyday phrasing that had slowly replaced the more formal words they once used. Valeria felt a warmth blossom in her chest. "I love you too," she whispered back. Words that felt so natural, as if they'd always been there waiting. Jack smiled a smile bright as the morning itself and headed inside to get ready for the day. Valeria watched him, heart full to bursting. She still remembered that day she returned to the hidden base after bargaining with the Emperor. Remembered how Jack had run to her, holding her so tightly she thought she might break. How he listened without judgment as she confessed everything she had given up, and what he had told her, Valeria. You didn't lose everything, you found everything. And now, a year later, she knew he had been right. Valeria stood stepping off the porch and into her little garden. She knelt among the rows of vegetables her hands once created to command millions, now tenderly coaxing life from the soil. Hands that once destroyed, now nurtured. This wasn't the life she was born for. It was better because she had chosen it. Every moment, every step, every breath, hers alone. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Valeria rose her basket full of vibrant greens and bright orange carrots. She glanced toward the little house Jack had turned into a home, and farther still toward the workshop where they were building something that could change the world. She thought of Mike, tough but loyal, Elena, sharp as a blade, David, endlessly hopeful, the villagers who had embraced her without ever questioning her past, and above all, she thought of Jack, the man who had seen worth in her when she couldn't see it in herself, who loved her not because she was a princess, but because she was simply Valeria. As she walked down the dirt path toward the village, a meteor streaked across the daytime sky, a rare and beautiful phenomenon. Valeria stopped to watch it blaze and fade on the horizon. On Gravia, meteors were seen as omens of great change. She smiled at the thought. Change had come, yes, but not in the form of conquest or crowns. It had come in the warmth of love, the quiet joy of a simple day, the belonging earned not by birthright, but by choice, once she had the galaxy at her feet, a crown, an empire, and unimaginable power. Now she knew a deeper truth. Not even the vastness of the stars could compare to having someone reach for your hand and stay. And with that thought, Valeria kept walking. Not as a fallen princess, but as a woman who had finally found herself. Thank you for joining us for the story of the day a princess sold an empire to save a mortal man. If you enjoyed this tale about the power of love breaking through every barrier, don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts below. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Every week we'll bring you new adventures, unexpected romances, and journeys into worlds you've never seen before. We'll see you again in the next story.